A poor girl asks a young billionaire for a bowl of soup. "Please, sir, I promise I won't eat it all. I need to take some to someone." He gives her the soup, but when he follows her discreetly, he discovers something shocking. Ethan Cole let out a sigh of relief as he exited Skyview, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. The meeting with investors had been productive, yet exhausting. At 30 years old, he already commanded a tech empire worth billions. The cold night air brushed his face as he adjusted his cashmere scarf. "Alfred, I'll be ready in 5 minutes," he said to his driver on the phone, then hung up. The street was almost empty. Only a few luxury cars were parked along the curb, and the glow of expensive shop windows lit up the sidewalks. Ethan checked his phone notifications, 3 urgent emails, 2 messages from his assistant, and a reminder about the conference in Tokyo next week. Business as usual. That was when he heard the voice. "Please, sir, I promise I won't eat it all. I need to take some to someone." Ethan lifted his eyes from his phone. A small girl, maybe 5 years old, was looking at him with large, dark eyes. She wore a faded red coat, far too big for her tiny frame. Her brown hair was tied in 2 uneven braids, and her boots looked worn at the tips. For a moment, he thought about ignoring her. The city had its schemes, and begging children often belonged to organized networks of exploitation. "Please, just a little food," she insisted, her voice soft and much too polite for an ordinary street child. Something in her gaze made him pause. It wasn't a look of desperation or manipulation. There was an almost adult-like determination in those young eyes. "Where are your parents?" Ethan asked, putting his phone into the pocket of his overcoat. "My grandma's waiting," she answered simply, rubbing her bare hands together. "She's not feeling well today." Ethan glanced back at the restaurant. Most business people would have ignored the child or, at most, handed her some spare change. That was the protocol, but something felt different about this situation. "Wait here," he said, surprising even himself. Less than 5 minutes later, Ethan came out again with an insulated bag. Inside was a large bowl of steaming vegetable soup and a package of fresh bread. The girl's face lit up as though she'd received the most precious gift in the world. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." She took the bag carefully, as if it held something extremely fragile. Instead of opening it and eating right there, as Ethan had expected, she just clutched the package to her chest. "Aren't you going to eat?" he asked, intrigued. "I can't take too long. I promised I'd be quick." She started moving away, walking backwards so she could maintain eye contact. "God bless you, sir." Before Ethan could respond, the small figure in red turned and hurried off. She didn't run. She walked carefully, balancing the bag as though carrying a treasure. At that moment, Ethan's phone vibrated. It was Alfred, the driver, letting him know he was waiting at the corner. Normally, Ethan would just get in the car and move on to his next commitment or head back to his penthouse. A 30-year-old billionaire's life had no room for distractions, but this child was a mystery. Why was a girl so young alone in this part of the city? Why didn't she eat the soup immediately? Whom was she taking it to? "Alfred, I'll be late. Something came up," he said into the phone, hanging up before the driver could ask any questions. By now, the girl was already at the end of the block. Ethan started following her, keeping his distance. It wasn't something he would normally do, following an unknown child around the city. He had meetings, calls and emails to respond to. He had an empire to run, but an unusual curiosity drove him forward. The little red figure turned left onto a dimmer street. Ethan quickened his pace, afraid he might lose her. Rounding the corner, he noticed the street begin to change. Sleek commercial buildings gave way to older, more modest constructions. The bright shop windows disappeared, replaced by small family businesses, many of them already closed at that hour. The contrast with the area he had just left was striking. In less than a 10-minute walk, the world of luxury restaurants and exclusive stores was far behind him. The girl kept walking with purpose, occasionally readjusting the bag to make sure nothing spilled. Her posture was surprisingly responsible for someone so young. Ethan stayed back, but he couldn't help noticing how a few people greeted the child along the way. An elderly man sweeping the sidewalk in front of a grocery store waved. A woman leaving a laundromat smiled and briefly touched the girl's head as she passed. She's not a stranger here, Ethan thought. Growing more curious, the girl turned onto another street, smaller and residential. Ethan slowed down, worried about being seen. The houses were simple, some in need of repairs, but each exuded a sense of dignity. Neat little gardens, curtains in the windows, bicycles locked up on porches. Then the girl stopped in front of one of the houses. It was a modest two-story structure, with peeling white paint around the edges. There were potted plants on the porch, and a soft light shining from one of the ground floor windows. The girl climbed the 3 steps up to the door carefully, balancing the bag. Ethan stopped a few yards away, partially concealed by a tree on the sidewalk. He saw her open the door and go in, without needing a key. Something compelled him closer. A curiosity he couldn't explain pulled him to the side of the house, where a lit window offered a partial view inside. There, in the dim light of a winter night, Ethan Cole, the man who had everything, found himself peering through the window of a stranger's house, driven by an urge he could not understand. What he saw through that window would change his life forever. Ethan approached the window cautiously, his heart beating faster for reasons he didn't fully comprehend. The small hand of the girl in the red coat turned the doorknob, and she entered without hesitation, clearly familiar with the place. "Grandma, I'm back." The child's voice echoed through the small house. Through the foggy glass, Ethan watched the scene unfold like a movie. The girl carefully placed the bag on a simple wooden table, moving delicately to avoid spilling the soup. "Luna, you took so long, sweetie. I was getting worried." That voice, a chill ran down Ethan's spine. It couldn't be. A woman of about 60 entered the small room, thin, grey hair tied in a simple bun, wearing a faded blue sweater and sweatpants. Despite her age, her movements were graceful, though a bit slower than Ethan remembered. Margaret. Time froze. 25 years vanished in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, Ethan was 5 years old again, running through the halls of the Cole mansion while Margaret called him for his bath. That gentle but firm voice that never needed to shout to be obeyed. "A very nice man gave it to me, Grandma." The girl, now identified as Luna, opened the bag with excitement. "It's hot soup and there's bread too. I told him I wouldn't eat any, just like you taught me." Margaret approached the table, her eyes widening at the contents of the bag. "Luna, my love, you shouldn't ask people for food. We've talked about this." "But you're sick and there's almost nothing in the fridge," the little one protested. "I didn't ask for money, only for food." "You always say there's no shame in asking for food when you're hungry." Margaret sighed, running her hand over her granddaughter's hair. Her expression was a mix of pride and worry. "You're right, my dear. Thank you for taking care of me." Ethan stood there, frozen. Margaret. His. The woman who had dried his tears when his father cancelled his 7th birthday party for a business trip. The person who told him stories of knights and princesses when thunderstorms frightened him at night. The woman who had disappeared from his life when he was 10, without even saying goodbye. Without a second thought, Ethan stepped away from the window and walked to the front door. His body seemed to move on its own, propelled by memories buried so long he'd forgotten they existed. He knocked 3 times, the sound echoing in his ears like drums. Soft footsteps approached. The door opened, revealing Margaret, who held a dish towel in her hands. "Yes, how can I—" The words died on her lips. Her eyes, those blue eyes that always seemed to see through Ethan's childhood fibs, went wide in immediate recognition. The dish towel slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor. "Ethan," she whispered, barely audible. "Hello, Margaret," he replied, surprised by the tremor in his own voice. The silence that followed seemed to hold 20 years of unspoken words. Margaret brought one hand to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "My God, Ethan Cole, how— Was it you who gave me the soup, mister?" Luna appeared behind her grandmother, looking at Ethan with genuine curiosity. Ethan nodded, not taking his eyes off Margaret. "Yes, it was me." "You know my grandma?" asked Luna, confused, looking from one to the other. Margaret seemed at a loss for words. Her hands trembled slightly. "Yes," Ethan answered. "I knew your grandmother a long time ago." Margaret finally regained her composure, though her eyes still showed shock. "Luna, dear, this is Mr. Cole. I worked for his family when I was younger. When I was a child," Ethan added. Margaret took care of me for many years. Luna's eyes went wide, delighted by the coincidence. Really? So you're like another son to my grandma? The innocent question hit Ethan in an unexpected way. Margaret had been more present in his childhood than his own parents, but he'd never thought of her that way. Someone who might consider him her child. Well, Ethan stammered, unsure how to respond. Please come in, Margaret finally said, finding her voice. It's cold out there. Ethan stepped into the small house. Inside, it was simple but notably clean and organized. Old but well-maintained furniture, a couch with colorful cushions, shelves with a few books, a small TV, on the coffee table, photo albums and children's books. Luna wasted no time. Do you want to see my drawings? Grandma puts all of them on the fridge. Luna, let Mr. Cole catch his breath, Margaret said, but her tone was affectionate. Ethan noticed how Margaret avoided looking directly at him, busying herself by straightening things around the room, though everything already looked in order. Please, have a seat, she said, gesturing to the sofa. May I offer you some tea? We have chamomile and... She stopped, as if realizing she was offering something too simple for someone like him. Ethan saw the mix of pride and shame on her face. Chamomile would be great, he said quickly. Margaret nodded and walked to the kitchen, which was really just an extension of the living room, separated by a small counter. Ethan watched her put water on to boil, her movements revealing a tension she tried to hide. How did you find me? She asked, her back still turned to him. I didn't, Ethan replied. It was a coincidence. Luna asked me for food near Skyview. Something made me follow her. Margaret turned, her expression a mix of surprise and something else, perhaps resignation. You were always a curious boy, she commented with a small smile. Some things never change. Luna, who had disappeared for a moment, returned with a pile of colorful drawings. Look, this is the park we go to when it's not too cold, and this is Mrs. Wilson's cat, and this is my room, but I share it with Grandma because our house is small. The child's natural chatter broke some of the tension. Ethan found himself smiling as he looked at her drawings. You draw very well for a 5-year-old, he said, genuinely impressed by the details Luna included in her work. I'll be 6 next month, she replied proudly. Grandma said maybe we can go to the zoo if it's not snowing. Margaret came back with 2 cups of tea, setting one in front of Ethan. Luna, sweetie, why don't you put your drawings back in the bedroom? Then you can eat the soup Mr. Cole brought. Luna gathered her drawings, but hesitated. You're going to talk about grown-up things, right? Margaret nodded. Just for a little bit. Then you can come back. Satisfied with the answer, Luna skipped off toward a short hallway that presumably led to the bedrooms. Left alone, silence returned, heavy with unspoken questions. Ethan watched Margaret sit in an armchair facing him. She looked tired, but there was a dignity in her posture he'd always admired. She's a wonderful child, Ethan remarked, breaking the silence. Yes, she is. Margaret's face lit up. Luna is my entire life now. She mentioned she's your granddaughter? Margaret nodded, her eyes clouded for a moment by a sadness she tried to hide. My daughter, Sarah, passed away during childbirth. Luna's father never wanted to be involved. So it's just the 2 of us. Ethan felt a tightness in his throat. He'd never known Margaret had a daughter. I'm so sorry, he said, and he truly meant it. It's been 5 years, Margaret replied with a sigh. The pain doesn't go away, but you learn to live with it. And Luna. She brings so much joy that sometimes I forget everything else. Ethan looked around again, this time noticing details he'd missed. A bottle of medication on the shelf, an overdue electric bill on the table, a mended coat hanging near the door. How are you, Margaret? Really, She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. We're fine, Ethan. Life didn't give us luxuries, but it gave us plenty of love. He knew she was avoiding the truth. Can I use your bathroom? He asked. Of course. Second door on the right down the hall. Ethan got up and followed the direction she'd given. As he passed through the kitchen, he discreetly glanced at the fridge Luna had mentioned. It was covered with colorful magnets and drawings, but when Ethan quietly opened it, he confirmed what he suspected. Nearly empty shelves, a bit of milk, some carrots, half a pack of cheese, and a few eggs. The small bathroom was spotlessly clean, more evidence of a life lived in extreme economy. The towel was faded from overuse, the soap was the cheapest brand, and there were only 2 toothbrushes, one colorful child's brush and one simple adult brush. When he returned to the living room, Luna was at the kitchen table, eating the soup he'd brought. Margaret stood by her, sipping her own tea. "Is the soup good?" Ethan asked, sitting down again. "It's the best I've ever had," Luna exclaimed between spoonfuls. "At school they give us soup too, but it's not as tasty as this." "Luna goes to the local public school," Margaret explained. "She's very studious. All her teachers praise her." "I can almost read everything," Luna said proudly. "Grandma taught me even before I started school." Ethan smiled. "Your grandma was always a great teacher. She helped me with my homework whenever I struggled." Luna's eyes lit up with interest. "What were you like when you were a kid? Were you messy?" "Grandma says boys often are." Margaret laughed softly. "Ethan was a very bright boy, but sometimes a little mischievous. Remember that time I hid all the brooms in the house because I didn't want you to clean my room?" Ethan asked, the memory surfacing unexpectedly. Margaret shook her head, chuckling. "You hid them in the attic and then forgot where you put them. We spent an entire afternoon looking. I was what, 7? 8? It was the week of your birthday." The fact that she remembered so precisely affected Ethan more than he expected. While his own mother often forgot his preferences and his father barely knew his exact age, Margaret recalled details of his childhood as if they'd happened yesterday. "Why do you have such nice clothes?" Luna suddenly asked, pointing to Ethan's expensive suit. "Is it because you're rich?" "Luna," Margaret gently chided, "you shouldn't ask those kinds of questions." "But you always tell me to be honest and ask if I want to learn," Luna protested, confused. Ethan smiled. "It's all right, Margaret." "Yes, Luna, I'm fortunate enough to be able to buy nice clothes." "Do you have a big house, with a pool?" Her eyes sparkled with curiosity. "I have an apartment. It's not very large, but it has a pretty view of the city," Ethan replied, omitting that his apartment was a 3-story penthouse in the most exclusive building in town. Luna kept up her interrogation while finishing her soup. "Are you married? Do you have kids? What's your favorite color? Do you like chocolate ice cream?" Ethan patiently answered each question, noticing Margaret watching their interaction with a soft expression. For a moment, it was as if time hadn't passed. He was once again that curious boy, and she was the patient figure who never tired of his endless questions. As they chatted, Ethan became aware of something strange happening inside him. Theirs in that simple house, with a 60-year-old woman and a 5-year-old child, he felt more at ease than at any exclusive party, corporate meeting, or gala dinner he regularly attended. It was as though an invisible weight had been lifted from his shoulders, a weight he hadn't even known he was carrying until that moment. The feeling was so strong it almost frightened him. Watching Luna excitedly tell Margaret about the nice man who gave us soup, and seeing Margaret smile genuinely despite all her apparent hardships, Ethan had a painful epiphany. His life, for all its material achievements, was empty. His luxury apartment never echoed with Luna's cheerful voice. His expensive meals in Michelin-starred restaurants never had the warmth of that simple bowl of shared soup. His carefully curated social relationships lacked the sincerity of Margaret's gaze. "Ethan, are you all right?" Margaret's voice brought him back to reality. "Yes, just thinking," he answered, trying to hide the emotion he felt. "You seem tired," she observed, using that maternal tone that had once comforted him in childhood. "You must have had a long day." "I did," he agreed, "but I'm glad I found you." Margaret's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, Ethan saw a mixture of fondness and what looked like regret. "We're glad too," said Luna, completely unaware of the emotional complexity in the moment. "Will you come back to visit us?" Her simple question hung in the air. Margaret said nothing, but Ethan could sense her tension. She would never ask for anything. Her pride wouldn't allow it. "If you want me to," he replied, looking at Margaret. "Of course we want you," Luna exclaimed before her grandmother could respond. "Right, Grandma," Margaret offered a restrained smile. "Ethan is a busy man, dear. I'm sure he has many important commitments." "I'm never too busy for old friends," Ethan said, surprising himself with the sincerity in his voice. Margaret looked at him with a gaze filled with contained emotions, gratitude, pride, maybe even a little apprehension. But what prevailed was a gentle nod of acceptance. In that simple moment, sitting on a worn sofa in a modest home, Ethan Cole, the billionaire who led corporations, brokered million-dollar deals, and dined with celebrities, realized he had found something his money had never been able to buy. And he wasn't sure he was ready for what that meant. The driver was waiting on the corner when Ethan finally returned. It was already past 10 at night, and the temperature had dropped further. "Is everything all right, sir?" Alfred asked, opening the car door. Ethan just shook his head and got in. How could he explain what had just happened? How could he put into words the whirlwind of emotions inside him? "Take me home, Alfred." During the ride, Ethan remained silent, staring out the window without really seeing the bright city passing by. In his mind, he saw only that modest house, the nearly empty fridge, Margaret's proud smile, and Luna's curious eyes. When he arrived at his penthouse in the Monarch, the most exclusive building in town, the sense of unease only grew. The 5,000 square feet of imported marble, glass and minimalist design had never felt so cold and impersonal. Ethan poured himself a glass of expensive whiskey and walked out onto the balcony. From there, he could see the entire city, the lights, the towering buildings, the river winding in the distance. Somewhere in that sea of lights stood a small house with warm yellow windows, where a 60-year-old woman was probably helping a 5-year-old girl brush her teeth before bedtime. The contrast was so stark, it felt painful. Ethan took a sip of the whiskey and closed his eyes. Immediately, memories he didn't know he still had began to surface. Margaret reading The Little Prince to him, using different voices for each character. Margaret teaching him to tie his shoelaces, patient even after the 10th failed attempt. Margaret holding his hand at his mother's funeral when he was 8, while his father stood distant and impassive. Margaret applying bandages to his scraped knees and telling him that real men cry too. Margaret making hot chocolate on winter nights, with marshmallows floating on top, just the way he liked. And then, one day, she was gone. His father had simply said, "Margaret no longer works for us. James will be your new tutor," as if she were just another replaceable employee, as if she hadn't been the most important person in his life for years. Ethan opened his eyes, feeling the weight of guilt. He had never asked why she'd left. He never tried to find her. At 10, he was already used to people coming in and out of his life without explanation. Then, as the years went by, he simply forgot. He forgot the woman who had been more of a mother to him than his own biological mother. Suddenly, the whiskey tasted bitter in his mouth. "What kind of person have I become?" he murmured to the silent city below. His phone rang, breaking the moment of reflection. It was Vanessa, his assistant. "Mr. Colt, sorry to bother you so late, but we need to confirm your presence at tomorrow's lunch with the board. Also, Mrs. Reynolds from the Children's Foundation called 3 times today. Apparently, you missed the charity event scheduled for tonight." Ethan ran his hand over his face, remembering the commitment he had completely forgotten after meeting Luna. "Please apologize to Mrs. Reynolds. Make a double donation to make up for my absence. And yes, I'll attend the lunch tomorrow. We also have a meeting with the Japanese investors at 3 and your personal trainer rescheduled for 6. Oh, and Julia called wanting to know if you'll join her at the gala on Saturday." Julia, his girlfriend, social partner. He wasn't even sure how to define the superficial relationship they'd kept for almost a year. "Tell her I confirm. Anything else, sir?" Ethan hesitated, a crazy thought crossing his mind. "Yes, I want you to research everything about assistance programs for seniors and children. Specifically, financial aid, healthcare access, and education." There was a brief pause on the line. "Sir, is this for the Cole Foundation?" "No, it's personal. Just do it discreetly." After hanging up, Ethan returned to the balcony. The idea of helping Margaret and Luna seemed obvious. He had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. He could buy them a house, secure a good education for Luna, medical care for Margaret, financial security for both. But then he remembered the pride in Margaret's eyes, how she'd tried to hide her struggles, how careful she'd been not to ask for anything, not even hint at their precarious situation. She would never accept charity, especially from him. There was another aspect that troubled him. What right did he have to just waltz into their lives now? Margaret had clearly built a routine and a stable environment for Luna, despite limited resources. They had a special relationship, full of love and valuable lessons that no wealth could replace. What if his interference caused more harm than good? Ethan didn't sleep that night. He stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment in that small house, every word exchanged with Margaret, every smile from Luna. He felt torn between the moral duty to help and the fear that he was acting for selfish reasons, perhaps just to ease his own guilt for forgetting someone so important. At 5 in the morning, unable to sleep, he got up and went to his office. In a rarely opened drawer, he found a small photo album, one of the few things he'd taken from his father's house when he moved out. There she was, Margaret, 25 years younger, holding the hand of a dark-haired 5-year-old boy with a shy smile. Ethan didn't even remember that picture. Someone on his father's staff must have taken it at some company event. He ran a finger over the yellowed image. Margaret looked so happy back then, and so did he. When did he lose the ability to smile like that, so freely? In the small house across town, Luna tossed and turned in the bed she shared with her grandma. "Grandma, are you awake?" Margaret, who also couldn't sleep, turned to her granddaughter. "Yes, darling. What is it?" "Do you think your boy will come back?" Margaret smiled at the description. "Ethan isn't a boy anymore, Luna. He's a grown man with a very busy life. But he said he'd come back. Do you think he'll forget?" The innocent question carried a weight Luna couldn't understand. Margaret thought carefully before answering. "I don't know, my love. Sometimes people have a lot going on in their lives." Luna was quiet for a moment, then spoke with that childlike certainty. "He'll come back, I know he will. He has sad eyes, like that stray dog we saw at the park, remember? The one that found a family later." Margaret hugged her granddaughter, her thoughts racing. Luna had always been intuitive, noticing things adults often missed. "You liked him, didn't you?" Margaret asked. "Yes, he gave me soup and didn't treat me like I was silly. And he made you smile for real. Not that smile you do when you're trying not to worry me." Margaret felt a pang in her chest. She hadn't realized Luna could tell the difference between her real smiles and the forced ones. "He seems nice, but he's kind of strange," Luna continued, yawning. "Strange how, dear?" "He has everything, right? Fancy clothes, money to buy expensive soup, but he looks lonely, like he doesn't have anyone to give him soup when he's hungry." Margaret stayed silent, amazed by her granddaughter's simple wisdom. Luna was right. In the short time she'd observed Ethan, Margaret could see that despite all his material success, something vital was missing in his life. "Everyone needs someone to care about them, right, Grandma?" Luna murmured, already drifting off to sleep. "Yes, my love. Everyone does." As Luna finally fell asleep, Margaret remained awake, thinking about the boy she had raised and the man he'd become. And for the first time in many years, she allowed herself to miss the past. The days when little Ethan ran through the halls calling her name, needing her to heal scrapes, tell stories, and teach him about life. Somehow, despite all the changes, she felt he still needed her. At 9 the next morning, Alfred parked the black car 2 blocks before the destination, per Ethan's instructions. "Are you sure you don't want me to drive you all the way, sir?" "I'm sure," Ethan replied, adjusting his scarf. He had traded his suit for jeans and a grey sweater, trying to look less formal. "Come back in 2 hours?" Ethan stepped out of the car carrying 2 large bags. One contained groceries, not just basics, but also some items he remembered Margaret liking to cook with: semi-sweet chocolate, cinnamon sticks, nutmeg. The other bag held clothes for Luna: coats, winter boots, gloves, and some colorful sweaters. Nothing extravagant, but all good quality. As he walked through the simple streets of the neighborhood, he noticed details he'd missed the night before. Children heading to school with worn backpacks, elderly people sweeping their front sidewalks, a certain dignity in the air, despite the evident lack of resources. It was a completely different world from his, though barely 20 minutes from the financial center where he worked. When he reached Margaret's house, Ethan hesitated a moment. He'd spent the entire night thinking about this moment, weighing arguments, imagining scenarios. But now, standing there with 2 shopping bags, he felt a shyness that didn't match the fearless CEO he was in meeting rooms. He took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Luna opened it, still in her pajamas, hair tousled. "It's the soup man," she shouted, jumping with excitement. "Grandma, Grandma!" "He's back." Before Ethan could say anything, Luna pulled him inside by the hand. "Did you come to have breakfast with us? Grandma made pancakes, but we only have a little bit of honey for them." Margaret appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. She wore the same simple clothes as the day before, but her hair was tied more neatly. "Ethan," she said, visibly surprised. "We weren't expecting—" "Sorry for dropping by unannounced," he replied, suddenly feeling awkward. "I brought some things, nothing special, just—" He held out the bags, feeling more nervous than he had when closing his first multi-million-dollar deal. Margaret looked at the bags with an expression that was hard to read. There was gratitude in her eyes, but also something else, a kind of dignified resistance. "What did you bring?" asked Luna, curious. "Luna, don't be nosy," Margaret gently scolded. "Some groceries," Ethan replied. "And, well, I thought you might need new winter clothes, Luna." The girl's eyes went wide. "For me? Can I see?" Before Margaret could intervene, Luna was already opening the bag of clothes. Her squeals of excitement at seeing the new red coat, a far warmer and sturdier version than her old one, filled the small room. "Look, Grandma, it's red like mine, but it doesn't have holes in the sleeves." Luna held the coat against her body, eyes shining. "Can I try it on?" "Please." Margaret hesitated, then nodded, unable to resist her granddaughter's delight. As Luna ran off to the bedroom, she turned to Ethan. "It's very kind of you, but we don't need charity, Ethan." The word charity hit Ethan in the gut, exactly as he had anticipated. "It's not charity, Margaret," he said, setting the grocery bag on the table. "Think of it as payback for all those times you secretly bought me ice cream against my father's wishes." Margaret allowed a small smile at the memory. "That was different." "It's exactly the same," Ethan insisted. "You took care of me when I needed it. Let me repay that, at least a little." Before Margaret could respond, Luna ran back in, already wearing the new coat. She had also managed to put on the gloves and one of the sweaters, creating a comical mix of colors. "Do I look pretty?" she asked, spinning around. "Absolutely stunning," Ethan replied, laughing. Margaret looked at her granddaughter, and Ethan could see her inner conflict. The joy Luna felt at receiving something new and necessary clashed with Margaret's pride and sense of independence. "Come on, I want to show you my toys." Luna grabbed Ethan's hand, leading him toward the small bedroom she shared with her grandmother. The room was tiny, with 2 single beds separated by a simple nightstand. Colorful drawings hung on the walls, courtesy of Luna. On a small shelf sat some children's books and a plastic bin likely filled with toys. "This is Mr. Buttons," Luna said, picking up a well-worn teddy bear missing one eye. "And this is Mrs. Fairy, a faded rag doll. And these are my books. This one is my favorite." She showed him a very worn copy of The Little Prince. "That was my favorite book too, when I was your age," Ethan commented. "Grandma reads it to me every night. She does different voices for each character." As Luna proudly showed off her few possessions, Ethan felt a lump in his throat. Each item clearly had history, meaning, and was well cared for despite obvious wear. "And here is where I draw." Luna pointed to a small table in the corner, covered in papers and crayons. "Would you draw something for me?" Ethan asked. Luna nodded enthusiastically, sitting down at the table. She picked up a blank sheet of paper and started working intently, tongue peeking out of the corner of her mouth as she concentrated. Margaret appeared in the doorway, watching the scene with a softened expression. "She's been talking about you since yesterday," Margaret said quietly so only Ethan could hear. "She asked if you had a family, if you were alone." "What did you say?" The truth, that I didn't know. It's been so long since we last saw you. Luna lifted the drawing triumphantly. It showed a stick figure with dark hair and a tie, holding what appeared to be a bowl. "This is you giving soup to me and Grandma," she explained. "It's wonderful," Ethan said, genuinely touched. "Can I keep it?" Luna nodded, handing it to him. Then, without warning, she hugged Ethan's leg. "Thank you for the new coat. Now I won't be cold at school anymore." Ethan felt something break inside him. How many times had he donated millions to charity? How many plaques bearing his name hung in hospitals and community centers? Yet none of that had ever evoked the feeling he now had from this simple thank you from a 5-year-old. "You're welcome, Luna." When they returned to the living room, Margaret was organizing the groceries Ethan had brought. "This is too much, Ethan," she said, holding a bottle of high-quality olive oil. "I can't accept all this." This was the moment Ethan had rehearsed in his mind. "Margaret, I need your help." She stopped, suspicious. "My help? With what?" "The Cole Foundation is developing a new social program for children and seniors," he began, choosing his words carefully. "We're looking for consultants with practical experience to guide us on the real needs of the communities." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Consultants. We need people who understand day-to-day challenges, who can tell us where our resources are best applied. Child education, food programs, health care for the elderly. You have decades of experience, Margaret, first as a caregiver, now raising your granddaughter. Your insight would be invaluable." "And how much does a consultant like that get paid?" she asked, as astute as ever. "A fair salary for the time and expertise. It wouldn't be charity, Margaret. It would be legitimate employment." He watched her eyes study him, searching for a lie or a trick. "You don't have to answer now," he added. "Think about it. The job would be flexible, allowing you to keep taking care of Luna." "Are you making up a job for me, Ethan?" There was a hint of humor in her voice, but also skepticism. "I'm not making anything up. The foundation truly needs this kind of guidance. We have resources, but often don't know how to apply them effectively. We need people like you who understand reality, not just statistics." Margaret didn't reply immediately. She went back to storing the groceries, lost in thought. "Luna needs stability," she finally said. "I can't accept something that would separate us or be temporary." "I understand," Ethan replied. "As I said, the position would be flexible. You could work mainly from home, maybe come to the office a few times a month for meetings, and it would be a long-term contract." Luna, who had been silently watching without fully understanding, tugged at Ethan's sweater. "If Grandma works for you, will you come here more often?" Ethan smiled at her. "Yes, I would." "Then she should say yes," Luna declared with childlike logic, "because you seem happy when you're here." The observation caught Ethan by surprise. It was true. He felt more relaxed, more genuine in the last 24 hours than in the past few years. Margaret sighed, partially giving in. "I'll think about your proposal. But let me be clear. What you brought today, it's too much. Consider it an advance on your future work," Ethan responded. She shook her head, but there was a slight smile on her lips. "You've always been persuasive, even when you were a child. Remember how you convinced me to let you stay up later on New Year's Eve? I said it was a family tradition, even though I knew my father never allowed it. And I pretended to believe you because I saw how much it meant to you." The moment of nostalgia was interrupted by the clock on the wall, which showed it was nearly 11. "I have to go," said Ethan. "I've got a meeting at noon." The disappointment on Luna's face was obvious. She clung to his leg again. "But you just got here. Can you come back tomorrow? We can play more. I can make another drawing for you." Margaret touched her granddaughter's shoulder. "Luna, Ethan is a busy man. He has work, commitments." "I can come back," Ethan interrupted, surprising even himself. "Maybe not tomorrow, but soon." "Promise," Luna insisted, her big, hopeful eyes locked on him. "I promise," he said, realizing he genuinely meant it. Luna hugged him tighter, and Ethan found himself crouching to return the hug properly. The warmth of that small body against his, the absolute trust she showed, stirred emotions he wasn't prepared to feel. When he stood up, Margaret was watching, her expression indescribable. There was concern there, but also a sort of cautious hope. "I'll think about your proposal," she said softly. "And thank you. For the clothes. For the groceries." Luna really needed that coat. Ethan nodded, unable to trust his own voice at that moment. As he reached the door, about to leave, Luna ran up to him one last time. "You'll come back to play with me, right? You really promise?" Ethan smiled, finally managing to steady himself emotionally. "I promise, Luna. I'll come back to play with you." Her laughter, bright, pure, and full of genuine joy, followed him as he walked back to his car. It was a sound he hadn't heard in a long time, the sound of simple happiness, free of complications or ulterior motives. When he got into the car, Alfred noticed something different. "Everything all right, sir?" Ethan looked out at the grey winter sky, which suddenly felt less oppressive. "Yes, Alfred, I think everything is all right." And for the first time in years, he truly believed it. The Cole Foundation headquarters occupied 3 floors in the heart of the city. The building was modern, with a glass and marble facade. In the lobby, a discreet plaque listed the charitable projects the organization supported nationwide. Margaret gripped the handle of her worn purse as the elevator ascended to the 10th floor. She wore a simple navy blue dress, the best she had, and had spent the entire morning fixing her grey hair. Even so, she felt out of place, as if she didn't belong there. "You look beautiful, Grandma," said Luna beside her, wearing her new red coat and one of the sweaters Ethan had brought. Her eyes shone with excitement. "Thank you, darling," Margaret replied, trying to smile. "Remember our deal. You'll stay in the kids' room while I talk to these people." Luna nodded, more interested in the elevator's light-up panel. When the doors opened, they were greeted by a young woman with a warm smile. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm Amanda, Mr. Cole's assistant. He asked me to welcome you personally. Welcome to the Cole Foundation." Margaret murmured a thank you as they followed Amanda down a wide corridor. On the walls were photos of smiling children, newly built schools, and seniors receiving assistance, all impeccably presented, a demonstration of success and efficiency. "This is our children's area," Amanda explained, opening a door to reveal a colorful room filled with toys, books, and several kids playing under the supervision of 2 caregivers. "Luna can stay here while you have your meeting. We'll have snacks soon." Luna's eyes went wide at the small children's paradise. She looked up at her grandmother for permission. "Go ahead, sweetie," Margaret said, trying to mask her anxiety. "I'll be right in the next room." Luna needed no further encouragement. Within seconds, she was exploring the bookshelves and introducing herself to the other kids with her usual confidence. "This way, Mrs. Wilson," Amanda said, leading Margaret to a conference room. Inside, Ethan was talking to 3 well-dressed people. He smiled when he saw Margaret and walked toward her. "Margaret Yefis, I'm so glad you came," he said. With a certain formality Margaret assumed was for professional appearances. "I want you to meet our team." Introductions followed in a blur of names, titles, and polite smiles. Margaret shook hands and tried to appear confident, though she felt more nervous than she had in years. During the meeting, Margaret stayed quiet for the most part, speaking only when directly addressed. Ethan explained that she would be a consultant for programs aimed at children and seniors in vulnerable situations, contributing her practical experience. "Margaret has a perspective none of us possess," he explained. "She knows the real needs of the people we want to help." The others nodded, taking notes and occasionally asking technical questions that Margaret answered hesitantly. "How do you think we could improve our after-school tutoring program?" asked a woman in a grey blazer. "Well," Margaret began quietly, "maybe by offering nutritious snacks. Many kids can't concentrate because they're hungry." Her simple suggestion was met with approving looks, as if she'd said something profoundly revelatory. Margaret felt her face flush. To her, it was just common sense, something anyone who worked directly with children would know. When the meeting ended, Margaret felt exhausted. She was used to taking care of others, not being the center of attention. Having her opinions actively sought and valued was disconcerting. "What did you think?" Ethan asked after they were alone. "They seem nice," she answered, choosing her words carefully. But I'm not sure I have much to offer, Ethan. These people are educated, experienced, and you have wisdom, he interrupted, something you don't learn at a university. Before Margaret could respond, Luna burst into the room, eyes shining with excitement. Grandma, they have a whole library just for kids, and there are computers too. And the teacher said I can come back whenever I want. Margaret smiled, genuinely pleased for her granddaughter. That's wonderful, dear. Did you have fun? So much fun. When can we come back? Well, we'll see how things work out. Actually, Ethan interjected, I was thinking we could start tomorrow if that works for you, Margaret. She hesitated. That's too soon. I have a lot to organize. And Luna's school. The foundation has a staff shuttle for employees, Ethan explained. We could pick you both up at home and drop you off at the end of the day. And about Luna's school, we could transfer her to one closer to here if you prefer. Margaret frowned. It was all too much, too fast. I'd rather keep her at the same school for now. She has friends there, a routine. Of course, I respect that, Ethan quickly agreed. The shuttle can take her to her current school and pick her up afterward. Everything seemed too perfect, too easy. Margaret felt that old caution creeping in. When things seem too good to be true, they usually were. Let's take it slowly, Ethan, she said firmly. We'll see how it goes before making big changes, he nodded, acknowledging her caution. But in the following weeks, Margaret gradually adapted to her new routine. 3 days a week, she went to the Cole Foundation for meetings and consultations. On the other days, she worked from home, reviewing proposals and making recommendations. Luna, meanwhile, embraced the new opportunities wholeheartedly. She loved visiting the foundation, playing in the children's area, exploring the library, and above all, she loved the attention from Ethan. He began visiting them regularly at home. At first, he used professional excuses, documents for Margaret to sign, questions about projects. But soon the visits became personal, without pretext. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Ethan arrived to find Luna drawing squares in chalk on the sidewalk in front of the house. What are you doing? He asked. Hopscotch, Luna replied excitedly. Have you never played? Ethan admitted he hadn't, or at least he couldn't remember doing so. Luna was horrified at his deprivation. I'll teach you, it's easy. And so Ethan Cole, the 30-year-old billionaire who ran companies and made million-dollar deals, found himself hopping on one foot on a suburban sidewalk, following the precise instructions of a 5-year-old girl. Margaret watched from the porch, amusement and worry mingling on her face. Seeing Ethan laugh openly while Luna shouted directions warmed her heart, but also scared her. The more attached Luna became to him, the harder it would be if one day he decided to move on. Another time, Ethan noticed Luna struggling with the laces of her new sneakers. Want me to show you? He offered, sitting beside her on the couch. Grandma already tried, but it's too hard, Luna answered in frustration. I have a trick, Ethan said. Let's pretend the laces are bunny ears. This bunny goes around the hole, then goes inside. Margaret, cooking dinner in the kitchen, listened with a smile to his improvised lesson. She remembered teaching Ethan himself with that exact bunny analogy. I did it, Luna exclaimed a few minutes later, jumping for joy with her laces neatly tied. I knew you could, Ethan said, feeling a genuine pride that surprised even himself. In these small interactions, a bond was forming, unexpected yet real. Luna saw in Ethan a friend, someone who had time and patience for her. And Ethan, without realizing it, was experiencing something he'd never had, the chance to live a simple, joyful childhood vicariously through Luna. For Margaret, watching this blossoming relationship was bittersweet. On the one hand, she was glad her granddaughter was happy, discovering new things. On the other hand, she feared the future, the inevitable disappointments, the moment when the novelty wore off and Ethan returned to his old life, because Margaret, more than anyone, knew how people could come and go, leaving behind only memories and, sometimes, broken hearts. A rainy Sunday afternoon found Ethan at Margaret and Luna's small house. The weather had turned suddenly, cancelling their plans to take Luna to the park. Instead, they stayed in the cozy living room, listening to the rain pattering against the windows. Luna had set up an office on the coffee table, drawing with intense concentration while humming softly. Margaret prepared hot chocolate in the kitchen, the same recipe she used to make for Ethan when he was little. "Need any help?" Ethan asked, rising from the couch. "I think I still remember how to do this," Margaret replied with a smile. "Though it's been a long time since I made hot chocolate for you." Ethan leaned against the kitchen counter, observing her. Over the last 2 months, they'd settled into a comfortable routine. Margaret now officially worked as a consultant at the Cole Foundation. Luna thrived at school, and Ethan spent more and more time at their little house. "I never asked why you left my parents' house," Ethan said suddenly, finally voicing the question he'd kept inside for so long. Margaret paused in stirring the chocolate but didn't turn around. "Your father fired me," she said simply. "He said you were growing up and needed a tutor with stronger academic qualifications." Ethan felt a surge of guilt. "They never told me that. They just said you were gone." Margaret sighed. "It was easier for them, I suppose. And I had no choice. I was pregnant at the time, needed another job quickly." "Pregnant?" Ethan asked, shocked. "With your daughter? With Sarah?" Margaret nodded, finally looking at him. "Yes. A few months after leaving the Cole mansion, Sarah was born. It was a tough time. And her father." A sad smile crossed Margaret's face. "A man I met. He worked as a driver for a wealthy family. We planned to get married, but he had an accident before that could happen." The revelation hit Ethan like a punch. All these years, he'd never imagined Margaret had her own story, her own struggles. To the boy he was then, she existed only in relation to him, a satellite orbiting his small, privileged world. "You never married after that?" Margaret laughed softly, turning her attention back to the now boiling chocolate. "There was never time, Ethan. I had a daughter to raise, bills to pay. Then Sarah grew up, met a man, became pregnant with Luna, and passed away during childbirth. Ever since, it's been just Luna and me." She spoke with a matter-of-fact tone, as if describing the weather, rather than a lifetime of sacrifices and losses. "Do you regret it?" Ethan asked. "Not taking another path?" Margaret turned off the heat and began pouring the chocolate into mugs. "Life is all about choices, Ethan. I chose my daughter. I chose my granddaughter. I'd do it all again 1,000 times without hesitation." She paused, meeting his eyes. "But yes, sometimes I wonder how it might have been, especially on quiet nights when Luna's asleep." In that moment, Ethan saw beyond the strong, capable Margaret he knew. He saw a woman who had spent her life putting others first, who had faced devastating losses and kept going, who raised a granddaughter with love and dignity despite hardships. And he also saw the deep loneliness she carried, a loneliness she accepted as part of her choices. "Luna, the hot chocolate's ready," Margaret called, breaking the reflective silence. The little girl came running, still holding a drawing in her hands. "Grandma, can I drink it in the living room? I'm almost done with my surprise." "Yes, but be careful not to spill." Luna took her mug with utmost caution and went back to her office, working on her secret project with renewed dedication. Ethan and Margaret returned to the living room, sitting on the couch. For a few moments, they sipped their drinks quietly, the sound of the rain and Luna's occasional murmurs filling the space. "What about you, Ethan?" Margaret finally asked. "Have you ever thought about getting married, having kids?" The question caught him off guard. In his 30 years, serious relationships had never been a priority. He'd had girlfriends, sure, but usually women as focused on their careers as he was, nothing deep or lasting. "Honestly, I never really stopped to think about it," he admitted. "It was always about the next goal, the next acquisition, the next project." "And does that make you happy?" The simple, direct question left him speechless for a moment. Was he happy? He had accomplishments, success, recognition, more money than he could spend in multiple lifetimes, a luxurious apartment, expensive cars. But happiness? "I'm not sure," he replied honestly. "I guess I always assumed happiness would naturally follow once I achieved all my goals." "And did it?" Ethan looked down at his mug, reflective. "Not in the way I expected." In that instant, he realized the truth of his words. His life was a series of transactions, with clients, business partners, even the women he dated, relationships based on mutual usefulness, convenience, appearances. Nothing like what he saw here in this simple home, where love and loyalty were the only currencies that mattered. "I'm finished," Luna announced triumphantly, interrupting their conversation. She came over, holding a colorful drawing. "It's for you, Ethan." He took the paper. Looking at the image, Luna had drawn 3 stick figures in front of a house. The tallest figure wore what looked like a tie, the middle one had grey hair, and the smallest, one with 2 braids, was in the center, holding both of their hands. "That's us," Luna explained, pointing at each figure. "Me, you, and Grandma at our house." Ethan felt a knot in his throat. "And look, I put a big sun up there because you always make the days happier when you visit," she continued, unaware of the emotional impact her words caused. It's really lovely, Luna. Thank you," Ethan managed to say. Luna smiled, then, noticing something in his face, tilted her head. "Why do you look sad?" "I'm not sad, You seem sad sometimes, even when you smile," Luna observed with the disconcerting insight children often have. "Grandma says some people carry sadness in their hearts like a heavy pebble." Margaret gently touched her granddaughter's shoulder. "Luna, sweetheart." But the girl had already made up her mind. She took the drawing from Ethan's hands and held it up like an official document. "Now you have a family again," she declared solemnly. "I don't have to be sad anymore." The impact of those simple words struck Ethan like a wave. A family. How long had it been since he'd felt he truly belonged to someone? Since he'd truly cared about someone besides himself? "Luna, Ethan has his own family," Margaret began, but Ethan cut her off. "Actually, I don't," he said softly. "My mother died when I was a child, and my father, well, we were never close. He lives in Europe now. We barely speak." "Then it's settled," Luna said, with the irrefutable logic of a child. "Now, we're your family." She handed the drawing back to Ethan, who held it as though it were a delicate treasure. Margaret looked on, silently apologizing with her eyes for her granddaughter's frankness, but also understanding the truth in her words. In that moment, while the rain continued to fall outside, Ethan Cole, the man who had everything, realized that, until now, he'd had nothing essential, and a 5-year-old girl, with a simple drawing and sincere words, had just shown him what he was missing. Winter arrived in full force. The city lay under a blanket of snow, the streets slippery, the air biting. At the Cole Foundation, Margaret's work had become indispensable. Her practical advice and life experience transformed various programs, making them more efficient and more human. It was on a particularly cold morning that Ethan got the call. "Mr. Cole, this is Miss Rivera from Hampton Elementary." Ethan frowned. That was Luna's school. "Is something wrong?" "Luna wasn't picked up today. We tried calling Mrs. Wilson since noon, but she's not answering. The girl is very worried." An alarm went off in Ethan's mind. Margaret never failed to pick up Luna. Never. "I'm on my way now," he said, grabbing his coat. "Please tell Luna not to worry." In 20 minutes, Ethan was parking in front of the school. He found Luna waiting in the principal's office, anxiety flooding her face until she saw him. "Ethan, you came." She ran to him. "Grandma never gets here late. Never. Something bad happened." He crouched down, resting his hands on her small shoulders. "We don't know yet, Luna. Let's go to your house and see what's going on. Maybe your grandma's overslept." But both of them knew Margaret would never sleep that late, especially on a school day. Whilst the door to the house was locked, Ethan was grateful Margaret had given him a spare key weeks ago. "Just in case," she had said. "Grandma," Luna called as soon as they entered. The silence that answered made Ethan's heart pound. The living room was empty, so was the kitchen. Luna dashed to the bedroom, Ethan right behind her. Margaret lay on the bed, barely conscious, her face pale and sweaty. She was breathing with difficulty, and a dry cough periodically shook her frail body. "Grandma!" Luna cried, rushing to the bedside. Margaret's eyes opened slowly. "Luna!" Her voice was barely a hoarse whisper. "Oh my God, school—" "I'm here, Margaret," Ethan said, approaching. "Luna's fine. I'm calling an ambulance." "No," Margaret protested weakly. "It's just the flu. I just need to rest." But Ethan was already on the phone with emergency services. "She's burning up with fever, Margaret. You need a doctor." As he spoke, Luna clutched her grandmother's hand, her big eyes filled with fear. "You'll get better, right, Grandma?" she asked, her voice trembling. Margaret tried to smile. "Of course I will, my love. It's just a silly flu." But Ethan noticed the effort it took her even to speak. And he also noticed a dark stain on the tissue by the bed. There was blood on it. The city hospital was crowded, as it always was during winter flu outbreaks. Ethan watched helplessly as Margaret was wheeled in for tests, Luna clinging to his hand like he was her last anchor in the world. "Is she going to die?" Luna asked suddenly, her small voice cutting through the noise of the waiting room. Ethan felt a knot in his chest. "No, Luna. Your grandma is strong. The doctors will take care of her." "My mom died," Luna said. "Grandma told me she got sick when I was born." Ethan knelt to face her. "That was different, Luna. Your grandma has a serious flu, but she'll get better." Luna didn't seem convinced. Her eyes, normally bright and inquisitive, were dull with fear. "What if she goes away? I'll be alone." The simplicity of those words hit Ethan hard. He pulled Luna into a hug, feeling her small body tremble. "You won't be alone, Luna. I promise." They were words said in the heat of the moment, but Ethan realized as he spoke them that they were a commitment bound to change his life forever. 3 hours later, a doctor finally called them into a private room. His tired face did not bring good news. "Mr. Cole, I'm Dr. Patel. Mrs. Wilson has pneumonia, quite advanced. Probably started as a simple flu that she overlooked." "Will she be okay?" Ethan asked, aware that Luna, though distracted by a book a nurse had given her, was definitely listening. The doctor lowered his voice. "We're concerned. Her age, plus a history of anemia we discovered. She'll need to stay in the hospital for intravenous antibiotics and constant monitoring." "Do whatever's necessary," said Ethan. "Cost is not an issue." Dr. Patel nodded. "There's something else, Mr. Cole. We found some anomalies in her blood tests that worry us. We'll need further investigation once she's stabilized." Anomalies. The word hung like a dark cloud. "I understand," Ethan said, though he really didn't. He couldn't imagine a world where Margaret wouldn't recover, where Luna might lose the only family she knew. "Can I see her?" "Yes, but only for a few minutes. She needs rest." Margaret seemed to have aged 10 years in a few hours. Hooked up to tubes and monitors, her frail figure was a painful contrast to the strong, independent woman Ethan knew. "Luna," she whispered as soon as she saw them. "I'm here, Grandma," the little girl said, approaching the bed cautiously, scared of all the equipment. "Don't be afraid, my love. Grandma just needs to rest here in the hospital for a while." Luna nodded, but her eyes told a different story. She studied every tube and monitor, with the instinctive fear children have of the unknown. "Ethan will stay with you while I'm here," Margaret said, her voice weak but firm. "Of course I will," Ethan confirmed, surprised at how natural it was to say. He hadn't even considered any other possibility. A nurse entered, gently indicating that visiting time was up. "Luna, sweetie, could you wait outside for a minute? I need to speak with Ethan," Margaret requested. Reluctantly, the girl left with the nurse, looking back several times. Alone, Margaret gripped Ethan's hand with surprising strength. "Ethan, if something happens to me—" "Nothing will happen," he interrupted. "You'll get better, Margaret." She shook her head slightly. "Listen, I'm realistic. We have to consider all possibilities. Luna has no one else but me. The state would put her up for adoption." The thought was unbearable. Luna, with her boundless curiosity and open heart, lost in the system, possibly never finding a permanent home. "That won't happen," Ethan said firmly. "I'll hire the best doctors. You'll be fine." Margaret offered a sad smile. "You've always been so stubborn." "But even the best doctors can't guarantee everything, Ethan." She paused, gathering strength. "I'm not afraid of dying. I've had a good life, filled with love and purpose. But I'm afraid for Luna. I'm afraid she'll grow up feeling abandoned, without roots, without love." Tears shone in her tired eyes. Promise me you won't let that happen. Promise me you'll never let Luna feel alone in the world." Ethan felt the weight of those words. This wasn't a request for temporary help or financial assistance or even legal guardianship. This was a plea for love, for a permanent emotional commitment to a child who wasn't his wars except through Margaret. "I promise," he said, realizing only after speaking that tears were running down his own face. Ethan's apartment, normally a sanctuary of sleek minimalism, had transformed. Brightly colored toys occupied one corner of the living room. Luna's drawings adorned the stainless steel refrigerator. The guest room now featured a patchwork quilt and a star-shaped lamp. After a week, Margaret was still in the hospital. The pneumonia responded slowly to intense treatment, and the doctors continued with their mysterious additional tests. Luna now stayed with Ethan while Margaret recovered. It was nighttime, and Ethan had just tucked Luna into bed after reading 3 stories. She always asked for just one more, her eyes making it impossible to refuse. "Ethan," she called as he was about to turn out the light. "Yes." "Is Grandma going to die?" The direct sincerity of the child's question froze him. Luna deserved honesty, but how could he be honest when he was just as afraid? "The doctors are doing everything they can so she gets better," he answered carefully. Luna was silent for a moment, her small face serious in the dim light. "When my mum died, I was a baby. I don't remember her, I only have pictures." She pulled the blanket tighter. "But I remember Grandma. I remember everything." Ethan sat on the edge of the bed. "Your grandma is very strong, Luna. She's fighting to get better." "But what if she doesn't?" Luna's voice trembled. "I don't want her to leave." Tears began streaming down the girl's face. Ethan pulled her into a gentle hug, his heart aching for her. "Please don't let my grandma go away," she sobbed against his chest. "Please, Ethan." He rocked her slowly, at a loss for words. What could he say? He had no power over life and death, despite all his money and influence. When the sobs subsided, Luna leaned back, her eyes puffy and red. "If Grandma goes to heaven like my mum, will you still want to stay with me?" Her question hit him like a punch. This child, who had already lost so much, feared losing not only her grandmother, but also this new connection they'd formed. "Luna, I'll always want to stay with you," he replied, with a certainty rising from deep within. "No matter what happens." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "Promise." "I promise." Luna held out her pinky. "Pinky promise. That's the strongest kind." Ethan entwined his pinky with hers, so tiny compared to his. "Pinky promise." Luna seemed slightly calmer, but her eyes still held a sadness too deep for a 5-year-old. "Ethan," she asked again, holding his hand. "Yes." "Can you be my friend forever?" The words came out between shaky breaths, and fresh tears glistened in her eyes. Something inside Ethan broke at that moment. The armor he'd built over the years, the relentless young executive, one the distant, calculating billionaire, disintegrated under those tear-filled eyes and heartfelt request. "I can, Luna," he said, voice trembling, "and I will, forever." She hugged him with surprising strength for someone so small, as though she feared he might disappear if she let go. That night, after Luna finally fell asleep, Ethan sat on the living room sofa, reflecting on how drastically his life had changed in a matter of months. From a solitary man focused solely on accumulating more success and wealth, he had turned into, what exactly? A protector, a friend, an improvised family for a little girl who stood to lose everything. These questions tormented him, but one certainty overshadowed all the doubts. He could not fail Luna. He could not fail Margaret. For the first time in his adult life, Ethan Cole was committed to something no contract could formalize, no lawyer could draw up, and no amount of money could guarantee. It was a commitment of the heart. And it terrified him more than any business challenge he had ever faced. After 2 weeks in the hospital, Margaret was finally discharged. The pneumonia had eased under intensive treatment, but the doctors made it clear her recovery would be slow. She'd need absolute rest, controlled medication, and weekly checkups. "Can't we just go home, Grandma?" asked Luna as Ethan drove them through the city. Margaretine, still pale and noticeably more fragile, smiled warmly. "Soon, dear. But the doctor said I need special care for a few weeks. That's why you'll stay at my apartment, Ethan explained. There's more space, and I hired a nurse to help you recover fully. The arrangement had been decided after long discussions. Margaret initially resisted, insisting she could take care of herself. But the doctors were adamant. Without proper care, she could relapse, and which could be fatal. Your room is ready, Luna, Ethan added. I think you'll like the surprise I prepared. The little girl's eyes sparkled with excitement. During the 2 weeks she'd spent at Ethan's apartment, the guest room had been her temporary space. But now, with the prospect of staying longer, Ethan had made some changes. When they arrived, Nurse Chen was waiting. With professional efficiency, she helped Margaret settle into the master bedroom, which Ethan had given up for her. Let's check out my room, Grandma. Luna gently tugged her grandmother's hand. Go with Ethan for now, sweetie. Grandma needs to rest a bit first, Margaret answered. Luna understood, in her own way, that her grandmother was still fragile. She took Ethan's hand and practically dragged him down the hallway. Close your eyes, he instructed when they reached the door of what used to be his office. Luna obeyed, trembling with anticipation. Ethan opened the door and guided her inside. Okay, you can look now. Luna's squeal of joy echoed through the apartment. The formerly austere office had been transformed into a children's bedroom. The walls, once grey, were now painted a soft yellow. A new canopy bed stood in the center, decorated with colorful pillows. A small desk occupied one corner, while a low bookshelf contained children's books and a few new toys. On the opposite wall, a blank board awaited Luna's drawings. This is the most beautiful room in the world, she exclaimed, running around to explore every detail. Ethan watched her, an involuntary smile on his face. Luna's simple, genuine happiness was contagious. Look, there's a box of new pencils. Luna discovered the art supplies on the desk, and real drawing paper. While she marveled at everything, Ethan noticed Margaret standing in the doorway, supported by Nurse Chen. You shouldn't be up, he said, concerned. I couldn't resist, Margaret replied, tears in her eyes. I wanted to see her reaction. Luna saw her grandmother and ran over to show her all the discoveries. Grandma, look, there's a star on the ceiling that glows in the dark, just like the one in the story you always tell me. Margaret sat carefully on the bed with the nurse's help. It's a wonderful room, Ethan. You thought of everything. There was gratitude in her voice, but also a silent question. Ethan knew what she was thinking. The more Luna got attached to this new environment, and to him, the harder it would be if they had to return to their old life. That night, after Luna fell asleep in her new room and Margaret turned in with Nurse Chen, Ethan stood on the balcony looking at the city. His phone never stopped buzzing, emails, messages, business notifications. He ignored them all. Instead, he allowed himself to confront the decision he'd been putting off. What would happen next? When Margaret was fully recovered, would they go back to their small house in the suburbs? Would he return to his old life, visiting them occasionally like a distant benefactor? The idea filled him with a deep discomfort he'd never felt before. For the first time in his adult life, Ethan Cole had something truly valuable to lose. Not property, not deals, not money. Something far more precious and infinitely more fragile. The unconditional trust of a child and a renewed connection with the one person who had truly mothered him. The pragmatic businessman in him knew the sensible approach would be to set boundaries, maintain a safe distance, and avoid diving into a commitment he wasn't prepared for. But there was another part of him, a part that had been growing day by day, that couldn't imagine going back to a solitary and empty life. Farsi Motism the following Sunday, now that Margaret felt somewhat better, Ethan took Luna to the park. Nurse Chen stayed behind with Margaret, ensuring she had a restful afternoon. The park was full of families enjoying the sunny day after weeks of bad weather. Parents pushed swings, helped on slides, took photos, and laughed at their kids' antics. It was a world Ethan had always watched from the outside, as a spectator to a play he wasn't part of. Ethan, look, a carousel, Luna pointed, eyes bright with excitement. For the next hour, Ethan immersed himself in activities he'd never imagined doing. He spun on the carousel, helped Luna climb the jungle gym and cheered when she made it down the tallest slide on her own. At one point, Luna dashed to the sandbox where other children were building sandcastles. She sat among them and joined in, chatting naturally and openly in the way kids do. From a nearby bench, Ethan watched her, fascinated. He thought of himself at that age, shy, isolated, always on the edge of groups, never truly part of them. Luna was different. Despite all she'd been through, she remained open and trusting. "Your daughter is adorable." Ethan turned as surprised. A young woman had sat at the other end of the bench, pushing a stroller. "Oh, she's not. I'm not," he stammered, unsure how to explain. The woman smiled, embarrassed. "Sorry, I assumed. The way you look at her." Before Ethan could respond, Luna ran up to him. "Ethan, come see the castle we're building." He stood, relieved for the interruption. "I have to go," he said to the woman. Following Luna to the sandbox, Ethan realized he hadn't corrected the woman's mistake. He hadn't said, "She's not my daughter." Somehow he couldn't get the words out. He knelt in the sand, completely ignoring the fact he was wearing expensive pants that would likely be ruined. "Look, we're building an entire city," Luna explained proudly. "This is our house, this is your office, and here is the school." As she spoke, pointing to shapeless sand mounds that in her imagination were elaborate buildings, Ethan felt a pang. Luna already pictured him in her envisioned future. To her, there was no doubt he'd always be part of it. And what if he let her down? If one day responsibilities, work, or simply old habits of prioritizing his own independence took him away, the blow to Luna would be devastating. One more person leaving her life. That thought stayed with him all afternoon and during the drive back to his apartment. "Did you have fun?" Margaret asked when they returned. She was sitting in the living room, looking slightly better. A book lay in her lap, and Nurse Chen was arranging the tea she'd prepared. "It was the best day ever," Luna exclaimed. "We went on the carousel 3 times, built a giant sandcastle, ate ice cream, saw ducks in the pond, and—" "Breathe, sweetheart," Margaret laughed. "Why don't you wash your hands? Looks like you brought half the sandbox back with you." As Luna left, Margaret turned her gaze to Ethan. "Thank you for that." She needed a normal day after all this worry. Ethan nodded, distracted. He sank into the armchair across from Margaret. "Something's on your mind," she observed, displaying her usual perceptiveness. "I'm thinking about the future," he admitted. "About how this will work once you're fully recovered." Margaret set the book aside. "And how would you like it to work?" The direct question startled him. Margaret was always so straightforward, cutting right to the core. "I don't know," he confessed. "I never planned any of it." "None of us planned it, Ethan. Life rarely follows our well-prepared scripts." He looked out the window at a city he had once considered entirely predictable, controllable. "A woman at the park thought Luna was my daughter." "And how did that make you feel?" Ethan met Margaret's eyes. Frightened, and oddly at peace. A gentle smile crossed Margaret's face. "I always knew, you know." "Knew what?" "That you weren't just a businessman, that there was a kind heart behind that ruthless executive image." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Even when you were a child, you cared deeply, Ethan. Maybe too deeply. That's why you built so many defenses." The accuracy of her observation left him momentarily speechless. "I got my latest test results yesterday," Margaret said, changing the subject. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "And it's not just the pneumonia. I have a heart condition that will require ongoing treatment. It's not necessarily terminal, but—" she sighed. "We have to be realistic. I'm 60, and I've never really prioritized my own health. We'll get the best specialists," Ethan said automatically. "We already are, thanks to you. But that's not what I mean." She looked at him directly. "I need to know what will happen to Luna if I'm not here to take care of her." Ethan felt the weight of that statement like a concrete block on his shoulders. This was the decision he'd been avoiding, the crossroads he'd tried not to see. "I'll take care of her," he said, the words out before he could think. Margaret didn't look surprised, only profoundly relieved. "Are you sure? It's a huge responsibility, Ethan." Changing your entire life for a child? She's already changed my life, he replied, feeling more confident as he spoke. And so have you. You showed me what was missing, what all the money and success in the world couldn't buy. At that moment, Luna came dashing in, showing off her clean hands to Nurse Chen. I have a surprise for you, Ethan said, reaching for a bag he'd left by the door. Luna approached, curious. Inside the bag was a professional set of colored pencils, 72 different hues, the kind used by artists. These are grown-up pencils, she exclaimed, eyes wide, opening the case with near reverence. I thought you might need more colors for your amazing drawings, Ethan explained. Without warning, Luna jumped into his lap, hugging him tightly. Now you're my favorite friend. The simplicity of her declaration contrasted with the complexity of the feelings it stirred in Ethan. Glancing over Luna's head, he met Margaret's eyes. She watched the scene with an expression of joy and something that looked like peace. In that singular moment, Ethan Cole, the man who always calculated risks, who never made impulsive decisions, who built his empire on rationality and control, allowed himself to simply feel, and what he felt was a love so pure and unconditional that it almost hurt. The difficult choice that had tormented him for weeks suddenly seemed the easiest, most natural thing in the world. Because, in the end, it wasn't really a choice between stepping up or walking away. It was a choice between living a life of true meaning or returning to an existence of empty success. And that, after all, wasn't a choice at all. Spring arrived in the city, bringing not only the rebirth of nature, but also a new phase in Margaret's life. After 3 months of intensive treatment from the best specialists Ethan's money could hire, she was finally showing consistent signs of improvement. Your latest echocardiogram results are encouraging, Mrs. Wilson, said Dr. Patel, reviewing her tests during a follow-up appointment. The medication seems to be working well, and your cardiac parameters are almost back to normal. Ethan, seated beside Margaret in the doctor's office, felt a profound relief. The weeks of uncertainty, the sleepless nights worrying over every new symptom, the constant fear he tried to hide from Luna, it had all taken a toll on him. But now, finally, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. So she'll be all right, he asked, unable to conceal the hope in his voice. The doctor smiled. With proper care and medication, Mrs. Wilson can expect many more years of healthy life. Of course, we'll need to keep monitoring, but I see no reason she can't gradually resume her normal activities. Margaret gave Ethan's hand a discreet squeeze, a silent gesture of gratitude that spoke volumes. On the ride back to the apartment, where Luna waited with Nurse Chen, Margaret finally broke the contemplative silence they shared. I need to thank you, Ethan, for everything. Without you, her voice caught. No need to thank me, Margaret. You would have done the same for me. In fact, you did far more when I was a kid, she smiled, looking out the window at the newly blossoming trees along the boulevard. It's different now. I was always the caregiver. First you, then Sarah, then Luna. I never really learned how to receive help. It seems we're both learning new things, he replied, maneuvering the car into the building's parking lot. When they entered the apartment, they were greeted by an excited Luna holding a colorful sign. Grandma, what did the doctor say? Are you cured? Look at what I made. The sign, full of hearts, stars, and stick figures representing the three of them, read in big as crooked letters, Welcome back, Grandma. Margaret knelt, hugging her granddaughter tightly. I'm much better, my love, and I love your sign. Miss Chen helped me with the big letters, Luna explained, but I did all the drawings myself. See? This is you, this is Ethan, and this is me in the middle. Ethan watched, feeling a sense of completeness wash over him. Something felt profoundly right in this moment, in this arrangement, in the three of them together as a unit. That evening, after Luna had gone to bed, Ethan found Margaret on the balcony. She stood gazing at the city lights, wrapped in a light shawl, looking more at peace than she had in months. What are you thinking? He asked, joining her. How unpredictable life is, she replied. If someone had told me 6 months ago that I'd be here, recovering from a serious illness, living temporarily in the apartment of the little Ethan I took care of so long ago. She shook her head, smiling. It sounds like one of those improbable movies on TV, Ethan chuckled. If they'd told me, I wouldn't have believed it either, especially the part where I learned to play hopscotch and bake cinnamon rolls using your recipe. You're actually getting quite good at that, by the way. They shared a comfortable silence, the kind that exists between people who don't need to fill every second with words. Margaret, Ethan began, his tone serious. I've been thinking a lot about the future, yours, Luna's, mine. She turned to face him, listening intently. You both brought something into my life I didn't even know was missing. A sense of belonging, a purpose beyond work and material success. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I know you're better now, and you're probably thinking about returning to your house, reclaiming your independent routine. We already talked about that, Margaret interrupted softly. The house is rented out for a year, remember? It was your idea, to help cover my treatment costs. I know, but that was just a temporary fix. I'm talking about something more permanent. Ethan took a deep breath. I want you two to stay, not as guests, not as a temporary arrangement, as family. Margaret's eyes widened slightly. Ethan, I'm not offering charity, Margaret. Far from it. I'm being selfish, actually. I've discovered I don't want to go back to my old life. I don't want empty apartments and lonely dinners. I don't want to wake up and not hear Luna's laughter or your morning stories. Margaret took his hand, holding it between hers. Ethan, you're 30. You have your whole life ahead of you. Eventually, you might want your own family, a wife, maybe biological children. I already have a family, he said firmly. It might not be conventional or what I expected, but it's real, more real than anything I've ever had. A tear slid down Margaret's cheek, and she quickly wiped it away. I always knew there was a big heart behind that businessman facade. So what do you think? He asked, suddenly feeling vulnerable. Can we try it? The three of us together. Margaret smiled through her tears. You really have changed, Ethan Cole. For the better, I hope. Without a doubt. In the following weeks, they established a new routine. Margaret, growing stronger every day, returned to work part-time at the Cole Foundation, now as the Director of Community Programs. Luna continued at her same school, but now she rode to and from school with Ethan's driver, often bringing friends over to play at the apartment she now called home. Ethan surprised even himself by reducing his workload, delegating more responsibilities, and spending entire afternoons at the park with Luna or helping Margaret in the kitchen. The life that once revolved solely around corporate goals and financial achievements now had a new center of gravity. Mr. Cole, the documents for the TechVision merger need your signature, his assistant reminded him one Wednesday afternoon. Leave them on my desk, I'll sign them tomorrow, Ethan said, glancing at the clock. I have to go now. There's a school presentation I need to attend. The assistant, initially puzzled by the changes in her once hyper-focused boss, now simply smiled and nodded. The new Ethan Cole, though still brilliant in business, had different priorities. That afternoon, perched on a too-small chair among other anxious parents and grandparents, Ethan watched Luna recite her poem about my special family at the school's literary fair. When she ended with, and even though we started off different, now we're a real family, and looked straight at him in the audience, Ethan felt a pride that no million-dollar deal had ever sparked in him. Margaret, seated beside him, gave his hand a gentle squeeze. She's been practicing that poem for weeks, she whispered. She wanted it to be perfect for you. It is perfect, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. After the presentation, Luna ran over to them, her face glowing with happiness. Did you like it? Did I get everything right? It was wonderful, Margaret said, hugging her. I loved the part about starting off different, Ethan added. Very true. Luna smiled. The teacher said it works because it's honest. She said the best stories come from the heart. Back at the apartment, which was definitely a home now, Ethan noticed more and more changes. Luna's artwork decorated walls, once adorned only with impersonal modern art. Photos of the three of them replaced decorative pieces with no real meaning. The kitchen, once used only for reheating takeout, now constantly smelled of home-cooked meals. One night, While Margaret prepared dinner and Luna set the table, a task she took very seriously, Ethan simply watched them, wanting to memorize the moment. "Why are you looking at us like that?" Luna asked, noticing his contemplative gaze. "I'm just enjoying the moment," he answered sincerely. "Like in our mindfulness lessons at school?" she asked, carefully placing napkins. "The teacher said we should stop and notice nice things." "Exactly like that," Luna nodded, satisfied with his explanation. "I do that sometimes too, especially when we're all together." At dinner, sharing a roast duck Margaret had prepared, an old family recipe she promised to teach Ethan next weekend, conversation flowed naturally from the day's events to future plans, and Luna's always fascinating observations about life. "Did you know Lily in my class has 2 dads?" "Not a mom, just 2 dads," Luna said between bites. "And Tommy has a mom, a stepmom, and 2 different dads because they got married again." "Families come in all shapes and sizes," Margaret explained. "Like ours," Luna concluded happily. "We have a grandma and Ethan and me." Ethan smiled. "Ethan, I'm not exactly a standard family member category, I guess." "You're cooler than a dad," Luna declared with absolute conviction, "because you chose to be in our family. My teacher said some people are born into our family and others choose to be there, and both are equally important." The casual wisdom of a 5-year-old could be astounding. Later, after Luna went to bed, not without 2 stories and a glass of water, her established nightly ritual, Ethan and Margaret sat in the living room, enjoying a quiet moment. "I've been thinking," Ethan said. "This apartment is spacious, but maybe we could look for a house. Something with a yard for Luna to play in, maybe an office for you to work on foundation projects." Margaret studied him. "You're really thinking long-term, aren't you?" "I am, but only if you're comfortable with it. I know it's a huge change." She smiled. "The biggest change has already happened, has Ethan? It wasn't about where we live, but how we live like a family." "So you agree about the idea of a house?" "I do, with one condition." "What's that?" "That it be our house, not just yours, where Luna and I happen to stay. I don't want it to be another act of charity, no matter how well-intentioned." Ethan nodded, understanding. "We can look together, choose together, really make it ours. And you're ready for what that means? Loud birthday parties, mud on the carpets, bedtime arguments. I've never been more ready for anything in my life." The next morning, a sunny Saturday, Ethan put the first part of his plan into action. After breakfast, he handed Luna a small box wrapped in bright paper. "What's this?" she asked, eyes shining with excitement. "It's not my birthday. It's a special present. Open it." Inside the box was a silver key attached to a star-shaped keychain. "A key?" Luna looked at him, puzzled. "It's the key to our new house," Ethan explained. "Well, we don't actually have a new house yet, but we're going to find one. And when we do, this will be your key. My very own key." Her eyes went wide with wonder. "Yes, because it'll be your home forever. Yours, Grandma's, and mine." Luna glanced at Margaret, who watched with tears brimming. "Is it true, Grandma? We'll live with Ethan forever, not just until you get better." Margaret nodded. "If that's what you want, dear." Luna didn't hesitate. She leaped into Ethan's arms, hugging him with all her might. "Now we're a real family, right?" she asked, her face buried in his shoulder. Ethan Cole, who had built his empire with cold rationale and calculated decisions, felt tears he could no longer hold back. "Yes, Luna. A real family." Margaret joined the embrace, forming a perfect circle. In that moment, Ethan realized with absolute clarity that his entire pursuit of wealth and power had actually been a pursuit of this: belonging, purpose, unconditional love. In the following weeks, they began house hunting. Luna drew up a treasure map of how she wanted the new house, including a bedroom with a starry ceiling, a yard to play in, and, casually noted in one corner, space for a dog. "A dog?" Ethan feigned surprise when he noticed. "When did we decide on a dog?" "All real families have a dog," Luna declared with unwavering conviction, "or a cat." "We can get a cat if you prefer," Margaret laughed. "I guess we just gained a new member of our unconventional family." Ethan raised his hands in cheerful surrender, Who am I to argue with such flawless logic? Dog, cat, whatever our family decides. During visits to potential properties, Ethan watched as Margaret slowly embraced her new role. At first reluctant to share opinions, she now actively participated, weighing the pros and cons of each house, adding practical insights only someone with her life experience could provide. "This kitchen is perfect for teaching Luna how to bake cookies," she remarked at one house. "And the office is big enough for you to work if you need to stay home." It was her subtle way of saying, this could be our home. Not just your home where we live, but a truly shared home. Finally, they found the ideal place. It wasn't the most luxurious they'd seen, nor the largest, but it had a special warmth they all felt immediately. 3 roomy bedrooms, a backyard with old trees perfect for a treehouse, a cozy kitchen, and a living room with large windows flooding the space with natural light. "This one," Luna declared after exploring every corner. "This is our house." One evening, after finalizing the purchase, they sat on the penthouse balcony discussing the move. "I was thinking," Margaret began, "maybe I could go back to teaching, part-time, while Luna's in school. One of the teachers at the foundation mentioned they need tutors for children struggling academically." Ethan smiled, pleased she was making plans for the future. "I think that's a great idea. I never thought I'd have this chance again," she admitted. "A chance to start anew, to feel I still have something to give." "You've always had so much to give, Margaret. You just needed the space and security to do it." She placed her hand on his gently. "That's what you've given us, Ethan. Not just a roof or financial security, but the opportunity to flourish. Luna's blossoming like never before. Did you see her last report card? And me, well, for the first time in decades, I'm not just surviving, I'm living." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "You've given me far more than I could ever repay. Before I found you again, I had success, but no meaning." The next morning, Luna surprised them with a detailed drawing she had made overnight. It showed the 3 of them holding hands in front of a house with a smiling sun above. "It's us in our new house," she explained proudly. "And look, there's a dog here too, because every real family needs one." Ethan laughed, picking her up. "You never give up, do you?" Luna wrapped her arms around his neck. "Grandma says if you want something a lot, you have to be persistent. Your grandma is a very wise woman. And you're very nice," Luna said, kissing his cheek. "Now we're a real family, and real families stay together forever, right?" Ethan glanced at Margaret, who watched with tears in her eyes. "Yes, Luna. Forever." In that simple moment, with Luna in his arms and Margaret by his side, Ethan learned the most valuable lesson of all. True wealth didn't lie in the numbers on his bank statement or the properties he owned. It lay in these shared moments, in the absolute trust in Luna's eyes, in Margaret's quiet wisdom and resilience, in the invisible bonds that now united them as a family not born from blood or obligation, but by choice, by choosing to love, to belong, to be there for the people who matter. And that, Ethan realized, was the only kind of wealth that truly mattered.